Giza Plateau, Egypt. The Great Pyramid is arguably the most enigmatic structure on the face of the Earth. It is the only surviving wonder of the ancient world and has inspired endless speculation as to how it was built and what purpose it served.
Ever since the first studies of the Great Pyramid in Egypt have been made, researchers have been amazed at the mathematical knowledge that is encoded into the Great Pyramid, the measurements that are used in it. Even the placement of the Great Pyramid has aroused great interest among Egyptologists.
The Great Pyramid is aligned to within 3/60ths of a degree of north, a more accurate alignment than any other structure on Earth.
When you look at the Great Pyramid's alignment, it's aligned very, very close to true north. Even more interesting is to think about tracking back in time, because the Earth's axis has been shifting slowly. It's what we call precesses. And so if there's been a shift in that alignment, it could be that it was even more accurately aligned to north in the past when they built it.
The Great Pyramid is not only perfectly aligned to the cardinal points, its placement on the Earth is seemingly intentional as well.
If you pass a great circle from the Great Pyramid through its cardinal and its ordinal directions, what you find is that these circles will pass through more landmass of the Earth than any other location on the Earth. You find that the Great Pyramid is essentially located at the center of the world's landmass.
Since the first accurate survey of the Great Pyramid in 1925, mathematicians and researchers have discovered even more profound connections relating to geodetic information, or information pertaining to the measurement and representation of the Earth, encoded in its design.
The Great Pyramid was built with a level of technological sophistication far in excess of anything that we have today. They don't use the inch as we normally have it in the English system, it's the cubit. And what's interesting about this cubit is that it is exactly 1/25 millionth of the polar diameter of the Earth, meaning the distance from the North Pole to the South Pole of the Earth. Chop it up into 25 million pieces, there's your cubit. It's perfect.
Is that if you actually take the length of the Great Pyramid at its mean socket level, which is the corners of the actual building, it translates into 365.24 pyramid cubits, which just happens to be the Earth a year right down to a quarter day.
The measurements of the length and width of the perimeter of the Great Pyramid correspond to an exact fraction of both the latitude and longitude measurements at the equator. Scaled up, this means the Great Pyramid directly corresponds to the circumference of the equator, as well as the measurement from the equator to the pole, making it a scale model of the Northern Hemisphere. Recently, using satellite technology, researchers have realized yet another advanced formula encoded in the design.
If you take the location of the Great Pyramid as a coordinate, this number sequence of this coordinate matches exactly the speed of light traveling through space, measured in meters per second. This is amazing stuff. When you consider the vast amount of information about the Earth that's encoded into the Great Pyramid, you can't just dismiss all of this as pure coincidence.
The Valley of the Kings, Egypt. The Taj Mahal, Agra, India. And King Pakal's tomb, Palenque, Mexico. Spectacular burial sites that date back thousands of years are found across the world. According to mainstream researchers, these locations are the final resting places for ancient leaders. But might they also serve a more profound, perhaps extraterrestrial purpose?
Why do we have the most massive of constructions in the far and distant past? Well, and according to the ancient texts and the ancient traditions, this knowledge was given to our ancestors by the gods.
If the sole function of tombs was to house the dead, then why are virtually all of these connected to notions of spiritual energy, images of astronomy, and a strong belief in the existence of other, arguably more spiritual worlds?
All cultures share this notion of somehow opening a doorway, opening a stargate, opening a gateway to another dimension so the soul can return. We know that it is meant because the soul is going to go on a voyage to the afterlife.
In the ancient world, there was a view that this life that we have, this physical life, is our opportunity to prepare ourselves for a vast destiny that lies beyond this life.
Could ancient tombs really have served another, more extraterrestrial purpose? Perhaps as portals to reunite the deceased with celestial beings. Many ancient astronaut theorists believe the answers can be found by taking a closer look at the mysterious texts of ancient Egypt. Saqqara. Situated on the west bank of the Nile River, 20 miles south of Cairo, this archaeological site is one of the oldest and largest burial grounds in all of Egypt. Overlooking the immense necropolis lies the pyramid of King Teti, the first ruler of Egypt's 6th dynasty. Teti built his pyramid and an adjoining mortuary temple during his reign more than 4,000 years ago.
Now, this pyramid is very important. It contains the oldest religious writing in the world, the pyramid texts.
According to archaeologists, the pyramid texts are a collection of ancient Egyptian religious writings that date back to 2400 BC. They contain passages about Osiris, the Egyptian god of the afterlife, and descriptions of how to prepare the pharaoh's remains during his ascent to the heavens after death. But according to ancient astronaut theorists, the pyramid texts didn't only guide the pharaoh to an afterlife, they actually provided instruction on how the pharaoh could travel to other worlds.
What is important to realize is that the ancient Egyptians say that about 25,000 years ago, the gods lived amongst them. Then they disappeared again. What the pyramid texts are saying is that we, the ancient Egyptians specifically, of course, are able to reach the gods again. For this we have to die, but once we're dead, we're able to join the gods once again. What we're talking about is some kind of other dimensional travel for the soul to undertake.
The Nile Delta, Egypt. A small centimeters-wide trail is cut in the desert floor by the rolling cocoon of a dung beetle. This strange-looking 2-inch-long insect, also called a scarab, uses the dung as both a source of nourishment and a place for storing its eggs. It will roll the ball in a straight line despite all obstacles, and is the only insect on Earth known to navigate by following the light of the Milky Way galaxy. Biologists just made this discovery in 2013. But 5,000 years ago, with presumably no knowledge of its unique connection to the stars, the ancient Egyptians held the scarab as a sacred symbol, representing a link to the gods.
Interesting that a great civilization could pay so much attention to a little bug. But it appears constantly throughout Egyptian temples and hieroglyphics. It's a very frequent image.
At the Temple of Karnak, overlooking the sacred lake, where the pharaohs received their coronation, a giant scarab beetle stands watch, representing the Egyptian god Khepri.
The Egyptians saw the sun moving across the sky during the day. Also around the desert sands, you'd see beetles moving balls of dung. And so the Egyptians thought that the force that moved the sun across the sky was a giant scarab beetle god, Khepri.
And they believed that the sun was what is known as the Eye of Ra, which was Ra's chariot, or his flying machine. And the thing that moved it, they believed, was the scarab-headed god, Khepri. And the scarab represented Khepri, the pilot, if you like, of Ra's sun ship or barge. He was basically a pilot to the gods.
But could there be another explanation for why the Egyptians regarded Khepri as a pilot? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest that the representation of Khepri as a scarab, and sometimes as a human with a scarab head, may have been inspired by actual contact the Egyptians had with an otherworldly being.
One has to wonder whether or not these beings actually existed, because the ancient Egyptians were incredibly proud in carving their history into countless of walls. And according to the ancient astronaut theory, we all came about through a deliberate mutation of our genes. And so it is entirely possible, in my opinion, that some of those creatures that we see depicted in reliefs and in carvings might have actually existed in the past.
Is it possible the ancient Egyptians could have encountered alien beings that had an insect-like appearance? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes. And as further evidence, point to the fact that the Egyptians' obsession with the scarab also extended to their funerary rituals. Abydos, Egypt, 7 miles west of the Nile. Within this expansive archaeological site lies the ruins of the Osiris Hall, where thousands would gather to worship the god of the underworld.
In comparison to many of the gods, Osiris was actually thought to have lived physically on Earth as one of Egypt's pharaohs. He is often depicted with a winged disk of the sun. And while many scholars have suggested that this is nothing else but to worship the sun, that sun, as far as the Egyptians were concerned, also had wings, and it descended from the sky. So in my opinion, something else was depicted, an extraterrestrial event that in fact took place in real life.
Although most ancient astronaut theorists believe that the Egyptian gods were, in reality, extraterrestrial visitors, there are many who wonder if Osiris was even made of flesh and blood.
One of the most famous stories that go hand in hand with Osiris was that he was dismembered by his jealous brother Seth.
Set went into a fury and tore his brother's dead body to shreds, tore it into 14 pieces. But Isis, the loyal wife, searched far and wide and found the pieces and pulled it together.
Isis succeeded in resurrecting him. Now, when I hear a story like that a being is dismembered and then somebody puts together those pieces and then they're able to magically resurrect him, I have to ask the question, is it possible that Osiris was not some type of biological entity, but perhaps he was some type of a machine or a robot?
For ancient astronaut theorists, perhaps the strongest evidence that Osiris may have been a robot can be found in the ancient pyramid texts, which describe the symbol of the Djed pillar as Osiris's spine.
Osiris in his resurrected form was portrayed as a pillar that clearly resembles a modern-day Tesla coil. The Djed pillar was considered a power pillar.
In this one carving at Abydos, it is as if Isis has her hand inserted into Osiris's back. And so perhaps it illustrates how she was manipulating Osiris. Could it be that the story of Osiris is something completely different than what we have thought?
Is it possible that our ancestors encountered highly sophisticated extraterrestrial robots in the ancient past? And if so, might there be some tangible evidence? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes,